In the shadows of history, there are stories so strange, so unsettling, that they seem to hover forever on the thin line between myth and truth. One of the most haunting among them begins in the chaos of World War II, a time when humanity itself was testing the limits of science and power. This is the story of the Philadelphia experiment, the day a U.S. Navy warship allegedly disappeared, and the terrifying price its crew paid. Our story begins in 1943, in the bustling Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. America was deep in the war. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking countless Allied ships. The military was desperate for a solution, something that could turn the tide. And so, rumor has it, they turned to science that bordered on the impossible, making ships invisible to radar, and maybe even to the naked eye. At the heart of these rumors was the USS Eldridge, a newly commissioned Cannon-class destroyer escort. According to those who claim to know, the Navy, with help from some of the brightest scientific minds of the day, began work on a top-secret project known as Project Rainbow. The idea to generate powerful electromagnetic fields that could bend light and radio waves around the ship, effectively cloaking it. The theories behind it were said to draw from Einstein's unfinished unified field theory, a concept meant to tie together gravity and electromagnetism. But this wasn't just an academic exercise, it was wartime. And desperation often blurs the line between genius and madness. Then came October 28, 1943. The day the experiment supposedly took place. On the deck of the Eldridge, massive generators thrummed to life. Thick cables snaked across the steel deck. Its crew members, some unaware of the true nature of the test, stood ready. Witnesses, dog workers, and sailors on nearby ships later claimed that a strange, eerie greenish fog began to rise around the ship. The metal itself seemed to shimmer in the heat of the powerful electromagnetic fields. Then, in an instant, the Eldridge vanished, not just from sight, but entirely from existence. For several seconds, or by some accounts, minutes, the ship was simply gone. And when it reappeared, something had changed. Witnesses spoke of horror. Sailors burned, some fused into the metal deck itself, others driven mad by what they'd seen, or what they'd become. Some crew members reportedly vanished forever. The most chilling part of the story? Some say the Eldridge didn't just become invisible. It teleported. The ship, they claim, appeared suddenly in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before just as quickly blinking back to Philadelphia. A feat that defies not just technology, but the very laws of physics. Of course, the U.S. Navy officially denied everything. They said no such experiment ever took place. Records show the Eldridge was never even in Philadelphia on that date. Yet, the story refused to die. The roots of the legend can be traced to a man named Carl Allen, who also used the name Carlos Allende. In the 1950s, he wrote letters to Morris Jessup, an author investigating UFOs, claiming he'd witnessed the experiment firsthand. Allen's letters were rambling and cryptic, but they painted a picture of a military willing to tamper with forces it didn't understand. Morris Jessup took Allen's letters seriously enough to investigate further. But as Jessup delved deeper, he found only dead ends, half-truths, and contradictions. Eventually, tragically, Jessup's obsession with the case seemed to consume him. He died by suicide in 1959, leaving behind only more questions. Over the years, new versions of the story emerged. Some claimed the experiment opened a rift in space-time, launching the Eldridge briefly into another dimension. Others suggested it was the beginning of mind control experiments, or a precursor to the infamous Montauk Project. Each retelling added layers of horror and mystery. But could there be a grain of truth buried beneath the myth? Some historians point out that the Navy was indeed experimenting with degaussing technology at the time, using electromagnetic fields to make ships less vulnerable to magnetic mines. Perhaps a misunderstanding of this real process sparked The legend. Others argue that sailors' stories, fueled by alcohol and wartime stress, grew into something larger than life. The mind, after all, is a fertile ground for fear, especially when surrounded by secrecy and rumor. Yet, questions remain. What about the reports of sailors vanishing or going mad? Some say the Navy quietly transferred crew members, erasing their pasts to hide the truth, and the Eldridge itself. After the war, it was transferred to the Greek Navy and eventually scrapped, taking any physical evidence with it. Even today, decades later, the Philadelphia experiment lives on not as a footnote in history, but as a living myth. It's been immortalized in books, documentaries, and films. For some, it's proof of a government conspiracy. For others, it's just a fascinating ghost story born from fear and coincidence. Why does it endure? Maybe because it asks questions that still haunt us. What if science could break the rules of reality? What if there are things we were never meant to know? And what price would we pay for that knowledge? Imagine standing on the deck of the Eldridge that day, feeling the air crackle with unseen energy, watching the sea twist into a green fog, and then, for a heartbeat, feeling nothing beneath your feet as the world itself seems to vanish. Would you survive with your sanity intact? Or would you, too, become part of the legend? The Philadelphia experiment reminds us that history isn't just what's written in books. Sometimes it's what lingers in whispers, in rumors, and in the dark spaces where truth and fear overlap. In the end, perhaps we'll never know what truly happened that October day in 1943. But maybe that's the point. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, decoing across time, daring us to look closer and to wonder what else might lie hidden just beyond the veil.